Everybody alert?
Yes.
So I'll start with that. At first hand, I like to watch a deep welcome of the Nitishwara community and enjoying this Ahmedabad audience. And I thank you for another concept that he made me marry BJP and Congress at the same time. He is brain injury and multiple intelligences. Very much near in most of them. And he asked me to do this marriage, and I'm going to try this. For this particular lecture, which I know I find very difficult, this first part is going to be for the brain injured child. The second part, when I'm going to discuss for the brainy child, I'm probably going to elaborate much more. Here I'm going to be, obviously I'm also brain injured with such beautiful lectures by now, getting toxic, hypoglycemia, and then discussing before that. So, our materials are going to be tested from now. So we have got a brain injured child on one side, and we have got multiple intelligences on the other side. So you all know brain injury by now. But now let's know what is multiple intelligence. So this starts with this concept, right? For a fair selection, if everybody has to take the same exam, this time that tree, and ask all of these people to do it, it's going to be horrible. So asking Sachin Tendulkar to sing is not smart, and asking Lata Mangeshkar to play cricket, she is not smart. But both are having intelligence. And if you remember this concept goes with the concept of what is multiple intelligence. So the traditional concept of judging of a child by one IQ, one single number, is now to be abolished. And that is where the multiple intelligence came the picture. But I want to walk before going that it is not intelligence. I can say that it is more of potential. So everybody is at different potential, and that is how I gave the definition that an intelligence is the ability to solve problems or to create products that are valued within one or more culture settings. Forget about the difficulties of it, let's go with the simpler one. What is simple? We all are smart. I like this idea. So we are all are smart. We are smart in different ways, and one way is not better than the other. But then how can we relate this with brain injury? One thing which came into the picture of these 8 injuries, don't worry about this cartoon, we are going to discuss one by one of those. The other gives so many postures. I am not going to read it for you. Don't worry. But I want you to highlight the first one. And what he says, that the potential for isolation by brain damage. So in 1980s, way back around 20 years back, Darwin saw that in some areas where there is a brain damage on the first with those left brain, the temporal region, you can suggest which area must have gone. Left side temporal region. We have discussed it in the first lecture. Speech. So you understood that the linguistic area where the speech language was there is not proper in that particular patient. And then he came to the postulate that probably each area of the brain has a different potential, different intelligence, different skill. And we are using those skills in a combination. We are not best in everything, but we are having a combination of all that, and that came with the concept of multiple intelligence. So let's take the bodily anesthetic. What is bodily anesthetic? This child is always on the move. The child is enjoying movement. So ask this child to sit and learn, you won't enjoy. But ask the same child to move around and learn, you will enjoy. So the child is on the move. And which areas are working in this child? The premotor cortex, the motor cortex, the sensory, because it is adjusting those sensory integration events, and the cerebral for the balance. So all these areas of the brain are working together to give a bodily kinesthetic intelligence. So for example, we again go back to Sachin Tendulkar. Sachin is enjoying these connections between these areas that are very well developed. And a person like me, the cerebral is going to be creating a problem, my vision is going to create a problem, and I cannot be the right bodily kinesthetic person. Now if you understand this, and if you have solved all those very good lucid presentations by the few speakers, we can connect them in a brain injured child. What will go wrong in the bodily kinesthetic areas? In a later stage, I am not going to discuss the acute and latent case. I am going to discuss about what happens then after that. The handwriting issues are going to be there. So body image, the child may not have a right body image of himself or herself. The child will be clumsy, so the child will be having everything going wrong with his hands, and lack of coordination. All these things will tell us that the bodily kinetic potentials are having some lesion for us. Let's take the other part of the intelligence. What is linguistic intelligence? Here, the child always with ears and hands. The child wants to talk. You find these kids that talkative, they understand by the speech, but ask them to move, they may not be good. Ask them to remember something by visuals, they may not be good. So linguistic intelligence, a thing which is overrated in our scholastic performance, forget about scholastic or MBBS and MDs also, is the linguistic. So we expect the person to talk from the dais and sit in the last bench and listen. And what we enjoy? We enjoy a sleep therapy in that part. That is about the linguistic part. So I may not be always good in linguistics. And what I feel, I'm one of them. So I may not remember the words, what the teacher is saying, but I can remember how the teacher looks. So that was one of the part of linguistic intent. So areas, we have all know this anatomy, the Broca's area, the Wernicke's area, the primary visual area, the angular areas, and the motor part. As Dr. Evida rightly said, what is going on in autism is a disruption. But it is not only disruption, there is one more interesting word, that is a disconnected brain. And it is said that these areas are not well connected. The long fibers are very long. And so this linguistic area goes down and the child is unable to talk, irrespective of able to talk. I am confusing the words. Ability is there, but inability because of those disconnections. So what may go wrong in a brain injured child in this particular area? There may be difficulty in expressing. So child has something in mind, but he cannot talk. So this is one part. Misses certain forms of humor. So all those Santa Manta jokes, the child will listen blankly. That is typically the linguistic areas are not working properly. The trouble in communication. The child may not be able to communicate. So these things are going where there is a linguistic intelligence parts are present. We have covered the bodily kinesthetic, linguistic. Now let's go for the another thing which the schools enjoy. I think all those 10th standard, 12th standard, whatever who is testing it, the schools are testing this logico-mathematical intelligence. They are worried about our mathematics, but we ask about which is the old 500 rupees and what next 2000 rupees, we are confused. So we are not taught about this, but we are taught about squares and roots. And this mathematical intelligence, the logics, is where the parietal cortex and the Atamaji circuitry comes into it. So this is the front area which is helping us to understand the logics and mathematics. In brain injury, what can happen? In the poor and logical and problem solving sessions, these children are very poor in mathematics. But I personally feel that most of us are having brain injury problem in utero when it comes to this mathematics. So we may be having a logical mathematics going wrong at that time. The visuospatial intelligence, this is something interesting. In this, the occipital cortex is working. And as we all know that then we know all the optic fibers, then eyes, and then amblyopia and all that. But what is happening? The child is learning from the visuals. And I want you to remember this when you have to come to the application of MI. And that is where the things come. For example, this particular child is going to see and remember. And the cognitive therapy, and she was saying this concept, and probably a person is unable to understand the verbals. But at the same time, you show the pictures, you actually remember. So you are giving a help or assist his auditory skills by the visual skills. And that is one of the crux in use of multiple intelligence as a therapy. It's a concept, it's nothing of therapy. It's a concept to use one idea to develop the other. For example, in a brain injury, what can go wrong? These particular kids will be having the trouble with shapes. They may be not understanding the circles and triangles and all that. They may be having the typical trouble with charts, maps, spaces, and they will be having difficulty in estimation of distances. So a child who is unable to localize himself in a three-dimensional perspective, he may be going wrong with the visuospatial intelligence. So we have to understand that as one of the very important aspects, and this aspect has a very important application in all our surgical skills, all radiologists. They are all good when it comes to visuospatial intelligence. Naturalistic intelligence, which I personally enjoy myself, is a part of the correct but a bit more behind. And it is said that these children are always with the nature. They say that one of the therapy of autism, one of the therapy of brain injury, one of the therapy of early MRs is greens and blues. The same child, if you try to teach the child in a classroom, he is going to get bored, but the same child, you take him to a park in the greens, he will learn better. Take him to a seashore in the blues, he will remember better. Because the child is connected in that environment and it is a naturalistic intelligence. In a brain injury, what can go wrong? It is difficult. Naturalistic is not only greens and blues. Interestingly, the people who are good with naturalistic intelligence, what they are having? They are having something more important. They can classify. The typical, this is mammal and this is, I forget those classifications. But for now, for all those classifications, they are the good part of naturalistic. So can we connect the naturalistic with the logical? Yes, logic also requires classification. Naturalistic also comes with the classification. Now imagine a child who is having some issues with logic. Add nature to it. Can he improve? He will improve. So another way to look at the same child in a therapeutic way. The musical. Music is something which involves all parts of the brain. It involves right from the frontal cortex, right up to the visual, right up to the everything is involved in music. And especially the emotional part is another key part when it comes to music. Since music involves everything, in a brain injury, again we find it very interesting in these cases. These cases, we poor ability to remember the melodies. I think I am not good at those things. Song, unable to learn music, then unable to learn musical instruments. But at the same time, I always think that musical intelligence is one of the areas which can be used in any part. It works in brain injury, it works in autism, it works in ADHD, it works in mental challenge, it works in anxieties, it works in adolescence. Think of a level and music works. So musical intelligence is one thing which can be used in all these aspects. Now let's go to the intrapersonal intelligence. What is intrapersonal intelligence? It is within ourselves. All those great saints, they are supposed to be good with their own self. So they know how they are doing well. And that is where the motivation comes. That is where the inner voice comes. And what is involved in this case is the heart of the brain, the limbic system, especially the amygdala. The same amygdala which is the creating problems in ADHD, if you remember. The same amygdala which has got emotional imbalances going on. So everywhere it is the intrapersonal intelligence which is coming in picture. So if you have got features in that area, the child is going to be impulsive, the child is going to be unable to manage his or emotions, becoming very aggressive. The prefrontal cortex is also coming in picture when it comes to emotion management and the lack of self-awareness. And it is commonly seen when the extensive brain intelligence in the central areas. The interpersonal intelligence comes to the same area, but the application is not different. It is connecting with other people. So when it's a connection with other people, it is this area where we are requires skill. So many people, the right person for coming from Gujarat and going to Delhi is interpersonal intelligence. So all these things are looking at how the child is able to connect with others. Very important when it comes to successful performance in work. So in a brain injury and the effect, there is trouble in the social interactions. There is trouble with the insensitivity to other emotions. But I don't think this problem is brain injury. This problem with all Indians. So the whole intolerance is now not only the political matter. The intolerance is everybody's house, everybody's heart. So the intolerance is the lack of interpersonal intelligence. And the one thing which we can improve anytime. So that's what we should start. So if all these intelligence are considered, one more ninth one which is added, and that is existential. And that existential thinks about the philosophy. Why there is life, why there is death. And better not think about it right now. Because we have to eat afterwards. So we are not going to discuss life and death right now. But let's keep it on one side. The ninth intelligence is coming up, and which may be useful for one visionary person anywhere else. Now let's consider this brain injury. I think Madam has dealt with the so lucidly and so wonderfully. This particular slide may be just for recap. And just the way Gardner thought, especially, Ray Tobin is the right person who thought of using different way of learning for a brain injured child. And that concept I am going to mention earlier. So let's imagine there are some centers about the language in the left temporal lobe. And there is a brain injury which is occurred there. What will go around? How the brain will try to improve, as Madam rightly said, they may develop their centers, activities next to the adjoining areas of the damaged area. So there will be local recruitment of the areas. To imagine it, make it more simpler, let's imagine that we are on the Bharat-Pak border. There are 10 soldiers at 100 meters distance. One of them is killed. What the officer will tell? let's adjust at 110 meters and manage the water. So the other centers have recruited themselves to take care of that particular soldier's place. The same thing is happening with this brain injury. The other center has recruited, and that is a local recruitment. And if you are aware in which area they are recruited, we know the MI which is connected with that, and we can have the therapy for that. There is one more thing which goes wrong, especially this is related to the early birth-related issues, where there is a cognitive problem. This center shift to another adjoining area, but there are other centers also. Now the important thing which I liked when I went through it, I was mesmerized by the concept that in the early years, when the knowledge load is limited, both the centers are enjoying, like Cinema and BJP enjoying Maharashtra. So they enjoy together. But what happened? Once the cognitive load increased, say first standard, second standard, they started failing. And that may be one of the mechanisms why learning disabilities difference are major, they are manifested at a later stage, even though there may be damage which is occurred early at the brain birth. So we may explain that later, nothing happening in all the LD people. Most of the parenting concept is that my child was doing all those A plus and A's in the nursery. Why it is going wrong in the primary? One of the answers to that may be this part, which can be one of the mechanisms to understand the cognitive crowding of the area. Third thing, it can happen that the centers may migrate within the hemisphere. I purposefully migrated them to make it a bit simpler to a larger extent. But now what is the application now? The auditory centers, the speech centers, they are migrated in what areas? Not exactly in the visual, they will be associated visual areas. Just imagine this event. Now, instead of giving a therapy to this auditory problem in an auditory way, what will be the better way? Think of the visual way. So the same child may learn better by the visuospatial techniques what the speech part. So we give them, show them objects, we show them figures, we have flashcard, and then connect auditory signals to that. And the children will remember better. So another way to look at the same problem, the brain plasticity how it is working. And then there is one more area which Manan has again described, that the child has migration to the similar mirror image, mirror centers on the other side of the brain. Now let's understand this mirroring in a different way. Now we'll get connected with this mirroring with what American has shown in Tarja mirror. It's not only the size which are changing, the centers are changing, but is there a possibility that because of mirroring, the alphabets are understood in a different way? And then the child may be right in this way. And that is what I just said, that everybody is right, everybody is smart, but he has to think in a differential way. Now you understand, if the centers are in the right way, what are the actual major functions difference in right and left brain? Again, one of the very beautiful slides which Dr. Chopra showed in the first slide, that the left brain is more for logical, and the right brain is more for emotional, artistic, musical and all that. Now if you are aware that the centers are migrated, the centers there is an injury on the left side, and now we have to use as repetition. If you have to use the other area, but if you have to use the right brain, I am not prefer the logical way of treating the right brain. I use the musical way of treating the right brain. So the same thing if the child has to remember, the child will remember by the musical way, by the artistic way, because that's a function of the right brain. So you can pardon me for this simile, but one of the simplest way to remember is if you have to deal with a man, you deal with his left brain, which is more logical, but you have to deal with a wife, you have to deal with the right brain, which is emotional. So if that goes, and if you are understanding this concept, then we are for example, you get a child who is quite emotional after his injury. Everything is that probably comes with the emotional disturbances. It's not only we have to manage the logic part, we have to manage the limbic system, we have to manage the right brain. And then we'll understand how the MI can come in picture for these cases. With this concept, let's go ahead and how the things, where the MI fits into brain injury. And I again appreciate Nitish for sequencing these lectures. The sequence absolutely with it should go wrong. The brain injury which is occurred in the primary, then you have your golden hour to golden days or latency periods and all that. And actually then, once the child is going home, that is the time the MI starts coming in picture. That is the time you are thinking in a multiple inter-areas. So discuss with the parent, what are the likings of the child? it is high chance that you start with the likings if you work. There is one more theory to the MI, and that theory is wonderful to understand. That you do the MI, multiple intent survey of the child, of both the parents, of therapist, of the doctor, map them together, and if there is something common in with that, start on that one. For example, the child is good with music, the parent, one of the mother may be good in music, the doctor may be liking the music. Let's start discussing on that one, and that becomes a connection for all the three. You come on the same line, and the therapy becomes same. So that is how the MI can come in picture, but giving the ideas to this children. So now, what is brain injury? I think you are all aware. It's a puzzle, it's absolute puzzle. Multiple pieces are coming to picture. But what is MI? MI is a special pair of glasses. So I'm looking at those 3D glasses, you go for picture movie of 3D movie. So it's a picture glass which enhances the picture of that problem. It gives a look which is bit deeper of what is going on in this child. So you are not going to just now imagine in terms of the lobes and anatomical parts of the brain and typically the maths and science. You are not going to look in that way. You look in the way the child is thinking, child is enjoying. And it's a tool to see the same thing in a different way. Actually, the whole message from this lecture I am going to give is, can we see that the same problem in a different way? Obviously not in ICU and DICU. There the way remains the same, very much protected and very much 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. But when it comes to coming out of that, the home therapy, the interventions, where the MI can be on in a picture. So I want to discuss, before I go with the other areas where really MIs work. Brain injury, then people are trying hard to use it in brain. So there are limitations. And we are rightly shown that a lot of physiological and pathological things which are going. But when it comes to other areas where the developmental issues come, I just wanted to give a glimpse of what happens. For example, ADHD. The child on the move, very hyperactive child. What typically the child will present? A good bodily kinesthetic intelligence, a good common intellect in nature, but they are not good with people, they are not good with self. That is where they are usually having, because they have lost their confidence. And what we can do now in MI, there is one more concept of what we call as a carryover. In maths, when we add 9 plus 3, we take carryover of that one to the next part. In same, we can carry over the bodily kinesthetic intelligence concept to develop the logical. So ask the child to play and remember, there is one hopscotch game. You write numbers on the ground and the child has to jump. And in that area, you just write a table of 3. And now that child plays hopscotch, but what we are teaching? We are teaching the table of 3. So you use the carryover from the bodily kinesthetic for the logical intelligence. Same thing, that may be good in nature. And what is the problem with ADHD? They are always bubbly. We use that nature as a calming effect. We may reduce the requirement of methylphenidate and rest of the drugs for such guys. And we may help on that side. We may develop the people's effect. Now that is the area where the confidence, the interpersonal confidence can come with the behavioral therapy. In autism, a very difficult area to treat, we are all aware. The child may be, commonly the child is good with gross motors. The child is interestingly good with spatials, even though the child is moving around. But they are very well aware of what is happening in the 3-dimensional range. Interestingly, the children are okay with music, but what they lack about socialization, they lack about language, they lack about emotional, they are unaware of themselves, and they are within their own self. Now let's use the same technique of carryover in autism. We use that spatial. Actually, the children may not have good eye contact, but how to teach the children? Visually. They can see, but they cannot connect. And now we are going to use the picture exchange. The picture exchange communication, where it is used, the pictures are used to improve the language. And that is why the communication part and language will always work. The language is body language. I always state that the language starts from eyes, gestures, pointing, mechanical and all that. And if you surprise this, we are all trying. The baby, what is the language of a baby? They connect with eyes. What is the language of a child? Nursery child. They dance. They are mechanical. What is the child moving ahead? They start singing. They are more visual, more body activity. Then what we teach? No, this is not a good way. We should start talking. Then we make them talk. We are not happy as a good adults. Then what we make do? We make them write. Writing is the best language, that's what we teach. Then they go to the higher education. And now the management people, what they do? No, only writing is not a good idea. We should have writing, visuals and audio together. Then they go ahead and become some CEOs. And now what the CEO does? He doesn't use language, he just goes by his eyes. And holds like a So language is not always speech. And that is where I want to highlight, and when it comes to visual spatial intelligence. So we can use this musical interface, but children love to dance with music, they learn with music, so we can use that carryover to keep their nerves down. The sensory integration part, very important to talk. Again, MI purpose, the MI thinking can be logically used for that. The ABA, the whole ABA concept, the applied behavior concept, is working with the inter and intrapersonal intelligence. And that is where we are working in autism. Learning disability, learning difference, whatever name you can say. This is a very different mix of picture. The child has good bodily kinesthetic, poor on logicals, good on okay on spatials, poor on language. Dyslexia is a typical presenting like that. And unfortunately, because everybody points at them, poor on the self, they lost their confidence. Now the carryover, I think you can understand now better now what I am suggesting. We improve this learning. They use flashcards. Most of the techniques in management of learning disability comes with use of flashcards. What we are using, the spatial, the visuals to improve the words. Again, if they are very good at activity, then we can use the same activity with the play, all those concepts of play therapy, dance therapy. That based on this, the carrier from the bodily kinesthetic to the logical words. Especially working on this learning disabled children, learning differences children, instead of, I always prefer when it comes to managing such kind, I don't start with the therapist first. I always prefer to make the child motivated, make the child help on himself. When the child gains his confidence, that confidence can make everything possible for the child to learn something which is not thought of, and that is where the carrier principle in MI concepts. I just wanted to highlight one of the interesting. I work with some chess people in Pune, and one of the grandmaster from Pune, Gokhale, I was working with him, and he gave me 20 chess players to work upon and try his MI on this game. So what we saw after this, they have got a good idea. And what we observed, these children, as expected, was having a very good logical intelligence. They are not for that. Chess and logical mathematical has to be good because they have multiple moves in it. They have got a good orientation on the chess board. They can remember the moves in spatials, visual spatials. And what these children were, when I was working with these kids, he asked me to help these kids to do better in the competition. And what we understood, and when we were doing their MI study, we understood they were having a bit low on interpersonal communication. All these brilliant people, they're bad with communication. So all the geniuses are known to be centric. So the chess people, we observed the same thing. They're interpersonal and intrapersonal. Some of the kids, they were very good in the logical mathematics. What was going on with them is, they were unable to manage themselves. So that confidence was going down. For example, there was a child, now he's doing very well, he's probably going for the third norm for international marketing. What was his problem? He was unable to give. For example, there is a much better rated child coming on in flight. He used to buckle. It was the self, the intrapersonal interior which was going on. And what was, when we tried for these kids, we tried improving them for the stress issues, the counseling, the stress management techniques. In the same game, the same chess player, they improve their scores automatically. Not only that, what Vishwanath Anand used to do previously, I don't know what he's doing now. He used to move in between the game, he used to go for a walk. So it's a bodily kinesthetic intelligence, the skills which were used to keep him afloat. So that we are using that for them. Interestingly, these kids, they do very well if you give them, they listen to music. Put them some classical instrumental music, not probably the image Reshma, but those classical instruments will calm their nerves and they perform better. Again, the concept of carryover, using multiple intelligences together. So with that, I come to the last concept of this lecture. Is all this, and I showed you in a very different way the same part. These intelligences are developing their wiring in the early stage, at different stage. I wanted to highlight the musical part, which is up to 3 years, where the linguistic continues up to the 5 years. And the enhancement continues right up to the puberty. Okay, but what goes interestingly afterwards, that which is happening you and me already, and person like me probably has gone down a lot, we lose these skills over the time. There is aging which is causing the problem over the time. only exception, and that is what I am to end this lecture with, is the interpersonal and intrapersonal experience. We can improve on this. So we are all good doctors, but when it comes to relating with patients, and probably one of the good way of linking this, as I told you, the typical job of BJP and Congress marriage is linking really with multiple intelligences, is our own MI. If we remember our own interpersonal, intrapersonal intelligence heightened to talk with the parents of an injured child, it is going to do a much better job rather than only treating the child's mind, because we can improve our interpersonal, intrapersonal intelligence. So let's go back with decision that I won't fight with my spouse now at the level which I want to. And improve the communication with my own spouse, the other videos also, and so that we can improve all of those. So I end with the last point which Olga has said. All children can learn and succeed, but not on the same day, not in the